this webinar on preparing next generation graduates for a global engineering workforce. Let me first take a couple of minutes and introduce myself and make a few comments about ASEE, American Society for Engineering Education, and also the Transforming Engineering Education conference that I had the privilege of attending in India a few weeks back in Pune, and how this project fits, that the one I will be talking about fits with that conference. So, as I mentioned, my name is Ashok Agrawal. I'm now a staff member at the American Society for Engineering Education. Prior to that, I was in a college, both teaching and administrative position for some 35 plus years, having retired from a two-year college as a vice president for academic affairs in 2013. So I do have classroom, both instructional as well as administrative background in managing both academic affairs and all the things that go with managing curriculum and things of that sort. As regards to ASEE, it was founded in 1893, so it's about a 123-year-old organization. It is primarily a membership-driven organization. We have about 12,000 individual members across the country and some foreign countries, and we also have some members in India as well. We have about 460 engineering colleges and engineering technology colleges that are member of this organization, some global online members, as well as some corporations like Boeing, Northrop Grumman, and some of the larger corporations that hire engineering graduates for their workforce. The focus of the mission of this organization has pretty much been focused towards engineering education. Many of you may know organizations like American Society for Mechanical Engineers or American Society for Civil Engineers or IEEE and so on. Those are what we consider or call as a discipline-focused societies. So if you are a member of ASME, it's largely because you are a mechanical engineer or a civil engineer and so on. However, in American Society for Engineering Education, it's primarily faculty who are involved in educational activities, and they are engaged because of their interest and professional activities dealing with engineering and engineering education. The membership, is of various categories. We have individual membership, which is about $89, online membership, institutional membership, both in the US and at the international, and you see the membership rate for that. And should you have any questions along that line, I'll be more than glad to expand upon it at a later time, or you can send me an email, which I can talk about that over the one-on-one. So let me talk about this project, Transforming Undergraduate Education in Engineering. And this conversation in the country has been going on for quite some time as to what changes, what improvements need to be made in engineering education in pedagogical areas, in curriculum area, and how the instruction needs to change and so on. And that is the kind of conversation I also heard being discussed at your third International Transforming Engineering Education conference in Pune earlier this June. I'm sorry, December and January. So we had received a grant from National Science Foundation. National Science Foundation is a sort of a quasi-government organization that is engaged in improving engineering and engineering technology and science, math, education, and research in the country, and it's has been around for many years. And they provide funding to some time to time to study topics like this. So essentially, our task was to ask the employers what knowledge, skills, and abilities they desire in continuing employees and new hires, because that is what drives the curriculum, as you know. Then the follow-up questions, there were several there, that who should be responsible for developing those KSAs. KSAs here, I'll keep mentioning KSAs, and just to remind you, it stands for knowledge, skills, and abilities. Who should be responsible for developing the KSAs, whether it should be the learners themselves, is it the responsibility of parents, teachers, faculty, mentors, employers, etc.? Who should actually do take responsibility or ownership of this. Then the next question is, when in educational path along the educational and lifelong learning continuum, should specific KSAs should be learned and reinforced? As you can imagine, and as you probably have seen in your own experience, students, when they first come to college, their capacity to engage and their capacity to grasp everything is somewhat limited. As they spend 2, 3, 4 years in the college, their knowledge base increases and their capacity increases, and then they learn things faster and so on. So the question becomes exactly in terms of where exactly they learn. And as all of us talk about anymore, that workplace is a lifelong learning environment. Much of what we learn, both in professional skills as well as workplace habits and things like that, happens at the workplace. So I think that's another issue. Where exactly these KSAs should take place: at home, in school, in informal settings, internship, work site, etc., etc., etc. So the question does become as to, okay, there are certain things that can be done in a classroom environment, or certain things students can learn in a co-op environment, or certain things students can learn in an internship environment. Because as you know, engineering curriculum is very tight. You only have 4 years to provide students all the knowledge, skills that you can, and it's definitely not possible to do everything within 4 years. So we need to look at, okay, where else learning takes place and where else students can learn whatever they are expected to learn. And finally, how the identified KSAs developers should engender specific KSAs within learners. And again, this goes back to the issue of pedagogy. Are they learning in the classroom through lectures, laboratory, competitions like participating in extracurricular activities, and so on? So those are the questions that we were charged to look at. So what we did in terms of this activity, it's a multi-phase study. Phase 1 involved bringing in industry for conversation, essentially going back to industry and asking those 4 or 5 series of questions from them as to what industry or what students should have. Then second phase, which again I'll go into each of these phases a little bit more in depth. I'm just highlighting the project as a whole for you. Second phase, after we met with industry, then we invited about 164 students through mail survey as well as face-to-face. This is what industry tells us that you should have. Where in your educational career are you learning much of these things? So that's something was very interesting. It's as you can imagine, and as you probably have seen, talking to students, you learn a lot. They have a different insight, they have a different viewpoint, and you learn a lot as to what they are thinking, what they're doing, and what where they come from. Then the third phase was focused more specifically on the gender issues in engineering. Women in engineering, what are the challenges for both recruitment and retention of women in engineering classrooms, in engineering profession, and so on. And that work is still going on, and reports are still being developed on that. And finally, the phase 4 and 5 will include bringing the professional societies, faculty, and community at large together and sort of talking about it, that this is what industry says, this is what students have said is happening. Now, how do we fix what needs to be done? So the idea is that we will be able to create a flexible framework with a clear understanding of qualities engineering graduates should possess for now and in the coming decades, or at least next decade. And that will require changes in curricula, pedagogy, and academic culture. And academic culture is a big part of it that, we'll talk about that more about that in a few minutes. Essentially, as I mentioned, was getting input from industry, and that was that you see there is we invited 46 industry participants, and these were industry participants of all levels, line management, middle management, and senior management, because we were interested in finding out what students need to know now and in 5-10 years. We wanted to make sure we had a good understanding of industry's expectation. Can you still see the entire slide, or you see? Okay. So we invited line management, middle management, senior management, and some academia also to sort of make sure that we had some input from academia in the earlier conversation as well. And it was a three-stage process. We essentially first conducted a pre-workshop survey, which was, and we essentially asked for important KSAs and quality of today's education. Then we had the second phase was actually inviting face-to-face workshop, and we invited 42 participants to attend the workshop and asked them, okay, this is what you said in your pre-workshop survey. Do you still agree with it, or are there different views on it? And sort of confirming or confirmation of what they responded in their survey in the mail survey or through survey questionnaire. Because often when you have face-to-face conversation, it brings a different dynamic in the conversation. It brings some new insight, and people change their mind, change their views, and so on. So we wanted to have them provide their independent view as well as collective view at the workshop. Then after that, we did a post-workshop survey essentially focused on, okay, this is what you said that the KSAs students should have. Who should be responsible for these KSAs? And we'll talk about that in a few minutes. If you have any questions in the meantime, please feel free to interrupt me. Right now, I guess the best way will be to write on the chat line so I can see if there are questions. As I mentioned, that phase 2 of the workshop was focused on students, which was, we call that Insights for Tomorrow's Engineers, and that was a two-stage process. We invited survey from about 141 students, of which 82 students were female and 59 male. Let me make a comment about that. This was rather eye-opening for us in a way, because we essentially send invitations to all 400 engineering deans across the country, asking them to recommend students who should participate in this. And as you can imagine, as you probably have the same situation in India here, number of female students in engineering programs is rather low. Depending upon which college you go, which program you go, you could be looking at 20 to 27% and so on. However, there is deans identified the names, and a great majority of that you can see on the number, 82 female students. So we wondered, exactly how that happens, because I guess female students are more engaged, more active in the what happens in the department, in the college, so they are more visible, or could be any number of reasons. But we had very good participation from both male and female students. And we conducted a pre-workshop survey, both online and again asking for KSA's importance and qualification. Then we invited 41 of those 141 students for face-to-face workshop. And excuse me, the idea there was to identification again, confirming what the KSAs they saw in their mail survey, as well as now coming up to confirmation of the KSAs in face-to-face conversation. Now, in the next slide, you see that we wanted to make sure there was a good representation from all different fields. We primarily, just because of logistics reason, we focus primarily on 5 major discipline areas: mechanical, electrical, civil, chemical, and materials. But you see that it, because how the programs are structured or named and things like that, we had fairly good representation from different fields of engineering, and that was something we wanted to make sure that we have good representation from all fields. The other part that I did not mention, almost all students, with the exception of maybe 4 or 5, were senior level students. So we wanted to make sure that students already had some good experience and background so they could speak about their engineering education experience in this activity. Now, this is a little bit complicated slide. Let me take a few minutes to go over with you, slowly. What you see, if you can follow my cursor, these are high priority. As I mentioned with the KSAs, overall, one thing that I did not mention yet was 36 KSAs were identified by the industry. So we're focusing on those 36, and from that, some were mentioned as a high priority, and others were mentioned as sort of lower priority KSAs. So I'll just mention the names of these KSAs and then look at this chart as to what it says. Good communication skills was definitely, I think we all talk about it. Physical science and engineering science fundamentals, ability to identify, formulate, and solve engineering problems, systems integration, curiosity, continuous learning, self-drive, and motive, cultural awareness, there is nationality, ethnicity, linguistics, gender, sexual orientation, and so on, and economic and business on the next page, which I'll go that in a minute once we discuss this. So these are some of the high priorities knowledge skills area were identified by both industry and confirmed by the students. Then, as I mentioned in a follow-up conversation, we asked who should be responsible for providing these KSAs. Should it be students, parents, academia, industry, or other? And is it a single stake? The way we analyze it is whether it was mentioned as a single stakeholder or combination of two or more stakeholders. That means in the second case, students and parents, students and academia, students and industry, parents and academia, academia and industry, and so on and so on. So what you see is good communication skills. Single stakeholder were 23%, students and parents 15%, parents and academia 50%, academia and industry 7%. So if you add all that up, it should add up to close to 100%. And that was the idea that, okay, tell us where exactly these things fall. Of course, as you can imagine, knowledge about physical science and engineering science fundamentals was pretty much all the way across in academic environment. So the respondents, of course, they all said it's the academic responsibility. Ability to identify and formulate, solve engineering problems, again, in academia as well as industry and academia also came up as a sort of a, dual responsibility or joint responsibility. Systems integration was pretty much expected that it should happen in the industrial environment in collaboration with academic institutions. Curiosity and persistent desire for continuous learning, that's something, seen as outside the classroom activity, mostly talking about students and parents, and to some extent parents and academia. Same thing with self-drive and motivation. Students as well as students and parents were the primary responsible parties for that. Cultural awareness, again, happens mostly at homes, students and parents, economic and business, quite a bit of responsibility on industry, even as a single stakeholder as well as a combination of two or more stakeholders. Continuing on with this, high ethical standards, integrity, global and social, intellectual and technological responsibility. Primarily, it came down to parents and academia. There was quite a bit of conversation about, what happens in the classroom, what happens at homes, has a more of an impact, and that is what is taken by students to their workplace. Critical thinking, this was sort of quite a bit of conversation. Infusing critical thinking in the classroom has a bigger impact on students than any other place. So that came up by this single stakeholder at 71%. willingness, willingness to take calculated risks all across the board, ability to prioritize efficiently, and that came up with industry and parents. Again, in the social environment, in the family environment, we have to prioritize things, and that was mentioned that, that's where you learn how to do that. Project management and supervising, planning, budgeting, again, that's of course with industry because it's an industry-focused activity, so industry and academia. Teamwork, ability to function in multidisciplinary teams, sort of dispersed all across the board, students, academics, as well as students, academic, industry, and so on. And lastly, entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship also pretty broad across the board with students and industry and academia and all the way across that. So that was sort of finding that we observed or calculated from the data collected from the workshop. So what were some of the general observations on this? First of all, we all know that. We have all heard it before. The question is that we all know that engineering profession is under pressure. There's too much to be covered. That you hear from faculty time and again. There's very little time, at least in the US. Every now and then there are conversations about expanding engineering education to a 5-year program, but it doesn't go any place. It's pretty much 4 years with 120. Actually, the pressure is on the other way around with state legislators and all asking the number of classes to be reduced, number of credit hours to be reduced, because it used to be as high as 136 or 140 credit hours, but it's bringing down to 120 and so on. Current training is out of sync with future requirement, and industry seeks T-shaped engineering graduates with who possess broad knowledge. So that's something, just a general observation across the board that was mentioned by the participants. Industry, some of the recommendations that came out from industry input was industry still values a solid foundation in math and science because that is the foundation of all engineering activities. Good communication skills, persistence, curious learning capabilities, drive and motivation, economics, just this kind of professional skills, if you would call that. All these things, all industry members expect graduates, every graduate to have these professional, what we call as professional skills. Change in pedagogical approach will be necessary, and that was a comment mentioned several times during the thing, that engineering will have to be taught differently in a classroom to really make these changes and to make these impact in the program. Then further, as you talk about the responsibilities, at least in the US, there's a lot of conversation about faculty reward structure and placing the premium on teaching when it comes to reward structure, because as you may have heard or seen in various your personal experiences, reward structure is often based on how much research dollars a faculty brings in especially in an engineering environment. So a lot of concern and question about should the reward structure be focused more towards premium in teaching. Then also industry needs to recognize, and they have a shared responsibility in developing T-shaped engineers. And industry and universities need to collaborate in creating internship and other opportunities for students, both students and faculty. So that was some of the highlight of comments made by industry. Now, next few slides, I'll share with you what students, when we met with students and the information we gathered with students, what did those reflect? Where are they coming from? So they talked about a lot about early access to mentoring, engineering experience, and advising. That was their, they need more mentoring, they need more engineering experience while they are in college. They also talked about open-ended interdisciplinary projects should be undertaken in the classroom. And they also talked about that real-world impact, case studies, internship, co-op, guest speakers. So and you will see in next few slides again, students really have their pulse on what really needs to change and how changes need to occur. They had few comments about the faculty themselves, and you see that in a few minutes. Allow faculty members to teach subjects they are passionate about or really skilled in teaching. The idea there was that, you know, when you department academic leader is making a schedule, they need to be aware of which faculty member should teach what courses. Show the application to engineering in first year math and science. That was also a very strong feeling from students that right now what happens when we take math and science courses, there is really no connection of how it relates to their subsequent courses in engineering. It is all very much theoretical and has no impact on it. So they are interested in finding out or having math and science courses more relevant so they can understand and they can make the context with engineering. Making teaching part of the basis for securing tenure. That is, again, going back to the reward system that we just mentioned earlier, that there was a lot of conversation about among students about the faculty reward system and whether teaching is really valued in the reward system. Improve accountability by assessing whether courses fulfill the promise suggested in the syllabi. That was another interesting observation. You know, as you can imagine, as you probably do, every course has a syllabi, but at the end of the syllabi, whether all the topics have been covered and how it's been covered and how it's being assessed, and that's something students were really interested in. And encouraging faculty to be creative and supply real-world examples. Again, please feel free to ask questions. So, you know, if you have any. Redistribute grading to increase the value of project-based learning. As I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of conversation about project-based activities, project-based learning, and that's kept emphasizing in that. Students also mentioned that they would like to see opportunity where they can earn. Typically in the US, all courses are, you know, most of the courses are 3 or 4 credit hours. Those are semester-long courses, and they were interested in looking at possibility of can courses be broken down into smaller modules and given credit for certificate of professional proficiency, soft skills, and so on. So they're looking at having some sort of restructuring of their curriculum a little bit. And they've talked about creating a sense of community, team design projects, really starting in the freshman year, building design projects in the upper level, diversity of professional and gender, and ethnic background and experiences. Last point I want to emphasize here, last bullet point, is that was mentioned by students quite a bit, that they would like to have the faculty of an institution look more like their classrooms in terms of our society. Because in India, so in the US at least, the majority of the engineering faculty are white male, and they would like to see more gender balance, more ethnicity balance in engineering classrooms, a faculty point of view. This is sort of a slide that summarizes what is a synergistic view on globalization of engineering, and it really doesn't, you know, this. If you look at ABET, which is a accrediting body, if you look at some of the studies that have been done under Global Engineering Project in UK and what we have done in TUEE, what we learned on TUEE, which is the 4th block on the right-hand side, is not much different than what has been mentioned before by various organizations and various agencies and like that in studies of engineering education. ABET talks about broad education necessary to understand the impact of engineering, and same thing you hear in ASE Global Engineering Project or UK report on Global Engineer, and some of the similar things were mentioned in our study also. I'll just highlight those for a few minutes. In TUEE, which is the last block, cultural awareness in the broad sense, nationality, ethnicity, linguistics, gender, sexual orientation, high ethical standards, integrity, and global social intellectual and technological responsibility, international and global perspective, history, politics, society and community, foreign language skills. So these were some of the things mentioned in our conversation with industry and students. And this is sort of a looking at global view of engineering and how do you bring globalization in engineering education. So these are some of the findings that I just wanted to share with you. I can open it up. I think we still have about half an hour left. So any questions, comments that you may have, um, we can definitely entertain that. And I'll show you my slide with my email address. By the way, let me run through these. We do have an international forum going on in 2016. Some of you may have interest in attending these. If you send me an email, I can send you more information about that. And we do, as I mentioned earlier, we have an India branch of ASE in India, which is primarily few members of India ASE. And lastly, my email address is agrawal@ase.org. So if you have any questions, you can chat now, or we can I can take your email questions later on. The question is where there are significant differences in the identified KSAs by student, faculty, and industry. If yes, can you throw some light? I don't think we saw any great differences. That's the interesting part of it. Is quite a bit of. Let me just respond to this. So we did not see a great deal of difference, because I think what happened was the students are truly very much in tune, at least senior level students are very much in tune with what industry is looking for and what exactly they should have. Any other questions? Sridhar, are you online?
Yes.
Okay, I'm just wondering if they can also they all have access to audio, so they can ask me audio also questions, right?
Well, I'm not sure about that, sir.
Okay.
We don't know if they have microphones.
Okay.
I think you can undock that questions pane because there are more questions coming.
Yeah, somebody's typing. Now the questions appear on the top and then it moves in the bottom. I cannot see right now.
There will be a button on the right which says undock pane.
I'm sorry, what's that?
There should be a button next to the X on the questions line which says undock pane.
No, I don't want to do that. I'm seeing a question, but it's not appearing in the cell. Okay, now sir. So the question is, the response from industry is quite lukewarm in Indian context. What are some of your suggestions to lure industry to collaborate with academia? The question here is, the Indian industry is lukewarm in communicating with colleges.
For collaboration.
So there's many questions. I'm sorry, I missed it, all of it. I didn't. Clarify. Next question, please clarify T-shape. What do you mean by that? Um,
You can answer verbally. You can just answer verbally, sir.
what's that?
You can just answer verbally. Don't type it because that's not going to be reaching everybody.
It's not. It's not going to everybody.
It'll only go to the person who asked the question. So it's better to answer verbally.
Answer what?
Verbally.
Oh, verbally. Okay. Okay. I'm sorry. Okay. The question is, please clarify. Please clarify T-shape. What do you mean is not clear. It actually means that as you can understand the shape of T, it's a depth versus the breadth issue. So if you're looking at a T, you have a vertical line which is deep, which is a depth of technical content, and then the crossbar is a breadth. So they're looking for students should have both depth and breadth of content. How successful are the survey as they are a key for corrections? You know, that's a very interesting question. One of the problems that we had with this study, and with any study for that matter, is how large a survey you can collect. Because of limitation of funding and the response rate and so on, we only had 40 participants. And some people have questions that how could you come up with a study that only takes input from 40 people? But this was done as a more of a snapshot, not a formal study that can be presented as a research project. So if it was a research project, it would have been a more broad-based study, and we would have looked for making sure all the things are there. But we were trying to capture a snapshot of what industry is saying, what students are saying. I think I already mentioned this, where there are significant differences in the identified KSAs by students and faculty and industry. If yes, can you throw more light? No, we did not see any great difference. Actually, there was quite a bit of agreement along that line. How KSAs are identified? KSAs essentially were identified from various studies that have been conducted over the years that have been written in literature. So from literature, we identified 36 KSAs, and then we use those KSAs for the confirmation purposes. As I mentioned earlier, the idea of this study was to confirm what has been said. Over the last 20-25 years, many studies have been done in engineering education, and we wanted to confirm as to which. So it was essentially a compilation of KSAs that have been reported in various studies and various reports. I think I already answered the T-shaped part of it. Can you suggest any case study where next generation graduates are prepared? I think one of the case that you may have heard of is, some colleges are starting to experiment with significant changes in pedagogy and all of that. And one such college here in the US is Olin College of Engineering near Boston is pretty much have redesigned their curriculum and are developing curriculum based on project-based learning, and there are many other colleges who are doing that. If you are interested in specific names, if you can send me a personal email to my email address, I can share that with you or with the entire group. Skills and quality expected by industry will vary from country to country. How will we assess? Oh, that's a very good question. Well, that's an interesting point. Um, it will vary, but I think along the same line, given the globalization of engineering profession, at least it's my view, and we have seen that the conversation is really very synergistic. I mean, you have, actually, for example, when I was in Pune, in India, I saw many corporations, and especially Emerson, which is right across the campus of College of Engineering Pune. And Emerson is an international company in the US, and their expectation from graduates are same as here. So I don't know if that really is very, very, significant anymore of differences in country. I'm not aware of, but I think that's a question that, could be studied. Regarding the PowerPoint, as I mentioned, I will send it to Sridhar. Is it the best way to send you the PowerPoint and you can distribute to everybody, or how do you do that?
Yes, that would be easy.
Okay, so I will convert my PowerPoint into a PDF file and send it to you.
Sure.
Okay. Whether it is internship, faculty, training, design of curriculum, sponsorship, project. Right now, T-shape is being addressed. Wish to hear on that. Thank you. Okay. I'm not sure if I understand this question. Right now, T-shape is being addressed. Wish to hear on that. Okay. Quality expected by industry will vary from country to country. Is KSAs related to mission, vision of school? No, KSAs are related to what industry is looking for. They are not, I guess a school can have its own additional KSAs. For example, I will have to stretch my imagination. If a school has certain specific expectation of their graduates, which is beyond what industry is looking for, of course you can add those as your knowledge, skills, and abilities, and so on. But the KSAs we were looking for, it was broadly from industry point of view and not from any particular school point of view. How to empower the faculty community to the global need? That is a very interesting question. How to empower faculty to meet how to empower the faculty to community global needs. I guess making awareness will be my response, is making faculty aware of the global needs, both in terms of societal needs as well as the global nature of the workforce. I think those two, it will be the thing to do. I don't know if I have any magic, answer for that. I think that's all the questions. Have I answered all the questions, Sridhar? Can you see those questions better than I can?
Yes, that was the last one. Yes, sir.
Okay. So I will send you the slides as soon as we finish this webinar, then you can share that with others. And anyone else has any question, they can definitely continue the communication with me.
Thank you, sir.
Anything else?
Oh, no. Thank you very much for the webinar, sir.
Okay, thank you all for participating in the webinar. I hope you had some, learned some and enjoyed the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Bye.